A gallery guard clocks it half a second too late. A red arc, mid-air, then a 5-meter canvas of Christopher Columbus, wearing it like a wound. This happened in a Madrid museum in October of 2025, and the man underneath the paint has been Spain's founding myth for 200 years. He's about to become something else entirely, a target. By the end of this, you'll understand why activists keep aiming for the paintings nobody can replace. Because this wasn't improvisation. Months before, activists at the Prado, Spain's most guarded museum, had already glued their bare hands to a Goya. Museum staff peeled them off, the paintings survived, and the world briefly paid attention. So when it came time to escalate, the method was already tested, the shock value already calculated. Columbus wasn't a spontaneous target. He was the sequel. Here's the twist nobody paints on the wall label. Columbus, according to historians, needed Spanish funding to launch his voyage across the Atlantic. According to historical accounts, Columbus pitched his ocean voyage to the Spanish crown after seeking support elsewhere. Yet 19th-century Romantic painters took that foreigner and blew him up to 5 meters tall, draped him in national destiny, and hung him as the face of a country he was never born into. Spain's founding myth, it turns out, was outsourced. Here's the problem with picking the biggest, most symbolic canvas in the building. It's also the easiest to criticize. Art world leaders looked at that red arc and didn't see brave protest. They saw bad targeting. The tactic, they've argued publicly, actively damages the credibility of the cause it's supposed to serve, turning a climate message into a story about paint, arrests, and a ruined masterpiece instead. Which means the more symbolic the target, the more the symbolism backfires. The people behind that red arc weren't a rogue cell. Climate activist groups have increasingly targeted cultural institutions to draw attention to environmental causes, treating galleries less as sacred ground and more as free advertising with excellent lighting. The Prado job was the pilot episode. Columbus was the premiere. Timed, staged, camera-ready. What still isn't settled is whether the strategy actually works, whether outrage translates into anything beyond headlines, arrests, and a very expensive dry cleaning bill. Across town in Barcelona, the target wasn't a canvas, but a cathedral. Activists threw red paint across the Sagrada Familia's facade that same summer, and this time, the cause had a body count. Wildfires had torn through Spain for weeks, and the paint was meant to stand in for ash nobody could see from a plaza. Police made arrests within minutes. No gluing, no negotiating. Straight to handcuffs, straight to charges. The fires kept burning regardless. 2 cities, 2 landmarks, the same argument and the same outcome. The building survived intact. The people who lit those hillsides never got arrested at all. Here's what actually leads the next morning's news. Not the acreage burned, not the emissions data, but the paint itself. Reporters ask about charges, about restoration costs, about who these people even are. The fires, the fossil fuel numbers, the actual policy failure, all of it gets a sentence, maybe 2, buried under the part where someone got handcuffed outside a cathedral. The crisis becomes a footnote to its own advertisement. Not everyone in the movement is convinced that's a fair trade. Some climate strategists point to campaigns built the unglamorous way, lobbying state houses, funding litigation, pressuring insurers and pension funds who actually move emissions numbers. No paint, no headlines about paint, just slower, duller progress nobody photographs. which raises the question this whole pattern keeps dodging. If the goal was ever public support, has any of this actually built more of it, or just louder disagreement about the wallpaper? None of this was improvised, and none of it was unexpected, because in late 2022, a significant number of museum leaders from major institutions worldwide expressed concerns about art vandalism and climate activism targeting cultural institutions. The target, exactly this. Attacks on artworks that cannot be replaced, they wrote, risk damage, no apology undoes. That statement sat in press archives for 3 years, unread by almost everyone outside the art world, waiting for a canvas to prove it right. What museums call fragility, activists call a lever. An untouched Goya draws no cameras and no headlines. It just hangs there, quietly ignored, the way most masterpieces have for centuries. But a painting under threat is a painting the whole world watches. It doesn't even need to reach bare canvas. The threat alone, broadcast live, is the entire mechanism. So the warning museums wrote to stop this may have written the playbook instead. Strip away the statement, the statistics, the museum letterhead, and what's left is a wager placed in public, in real time. On one side, 92 directors and every conservator who's ever spent a decade repairing what took an afternoon to wreck. On the other, activists betting that a 5-century-old myth in a gilded frame can generate more fury than a forest actually turning to ash. Red paint on canvas travels faster than smoke ever did. That's not a coincidence. That's the entire strategy. The warning those 92 directors signed wasn't vague. It named the exact danger that anyone throwing paint or gluing skin to a canvas was underestimating just how fragile these things really are. Pigment applied by hand centuries ago, never designed to survive contact, let alone an attack. Cleaning removes the paint. It cannot remove the fact that the surface was never meant to be touched at all. For a painting like this, there's no second draft waiting in some archive. Conservators can lift the red, layer by layer, under lights and magnification, for months. What they're restoring is pigment. What they can't restore is the moment before the paint hit, the version of that canvas that had never been attacked at all. That version is already gone. And yet none of that grief seems to be moving public opinion the way anyone hoped. Museum visitor surveys and op-ed pages tell a duller story. Sympathy for the climate cause, dropping. Sympathy for the paintings, rising. Commentators who spent years defending direct action are now openly asking if red paint recruited a single new supporter or just handed the opposition its favorite headline. The tactic meant to make people look harder at the crisis may be teaching them to look away from the activists instead. And yet, for all the fury on both sides, the body count stays at 0. Not one painting, not one facade has actually been destroyed. What's changed instead is quieter. Glass. Sheets of it, reinforced, bolted over frames that used to hang open to the room. Museums didn't wait for a verdict on effectiveness. They just built a wall between the argument and the art. The debate rages on. The paintings, increasingly, can't hear it anymore. No one from the museum has said, on the record, how deep that red actually went, or whether the canvas comes back whole. No timeline, no damage report, nothing. Which leaves the activists' entire bet hanging unanswered in public. That a threatened masterpiece buys more attention than a safe one ever could. Right now, nobody can prove them wrong. Nobody's proven them right either. So the fight doesn't get resolved. It just moves. Madrid's regional government hasn't proposed new protections, no legislation, no reinforced glass mandate beyond what individual museums quietly install themselves. Activists haven't stopped, and museums haven't budged. Same argument, same standoff, waiting only for the next frame big enough to matter. He never asked to be Spanish, Genoese, adopted 200 years later by painters who needed a founding hero and didn't much care where he was born. Now he's something new, not a myth exactly, more a scoreboard, the one surface both sides keep aiming at when the real argument has nowhere else to land. Spain didn't just inherit a foreigner, it inherited his canvas too. The fires in Barcelona had names, dates, acreage, real numbers, nobody printed. The paint got covered within the hour. So the actual disaster, the one with smoke and ash and no red pigment to photograph, went back to being background noise, which leaves one open question worth chasing next. What happens to a protest when the emergency finally outshines the stunt?